Now comes the hard part, the future. Say what you will about Ronald Reagan, he has the capacity to inspire, to lead. But to lead us where and into what? When we finally reach that shining city on the hill, will it be real or just a vacant Hollywood set? The Reagan legacy when we come back.
Ship of Ronald Reagan, a long way, but not all the way. Every president leaves the country something, even if it's only a debate on how much or how little he left us.
They all leave legacies, all our presidents. When they're timid, power trickles away from the White House and into our courts and Congress. When they're assertive and powerful, our presidents create agendas designed to outlive them.
In our memo to the future on Ronald Reagan, we wanted to include the comments of some other Americans who have had their own impact on the country. What do they think Ronald Reagan's legacy will be?
His fundamental failure, and I hope this will be a positive legacy for the future because it's so obvious, is that he was always out of touch, he was never in charge, and he was never informed.
The personality of Reagan is going to endure. The very fact that his level of popularity is almost reassumed after that big dip of the last few months suggests that there is an abiding affection there for what he represents to people. And that affection, I think, is going to end up being transhistorical.
The essence that people will remember this president for is that he understood a few simple essences, such as motivation, such as less government is better government, things that everybody gives lip service to, but as president, he practiced.
I'm afraid that Ronald Reagan has, in a sense, weakened and trivialized the presidency, that he has, for a long time now, made it more important for a president to be popular than to be effective.
Looking ahead 20 or 30 years, I don't think there's going to be a very lasting legacy to this administration. What's it going to be? SDI? That's a fantasy.
The SDI issue will probably turn out to be the most important because SDI is not just a technological question and it's not just about shooting down nukes. In the end, it's about the restructure of Europe. It has to do with the future of NATO, the future of European relations with the United States.
By the year 2000, the United States and or the Soviet Union will have a strategic defense against ballistic missiles. And there's no doubt that history is going to say that Ronald Reagan was the father of that idea. The only open question is which of the two of us is going to get there first.
President Reagan replaced mutually assured destruction with mutually assured survival. My purpose for my limited future is to make mutually assured survival technically possible.
The Reagan era will be remembered as the moment when American economic preeminence in the world collapsed and we became a debtor nation and commenced a long time of troubles in the world economy that touched us as in the past we were untouched.
I think we'll remember him chiefly for geniality, smiling, waving, Grecian formula, making people feel good just by smiling and waving at him.
I believe that the generation living in the year 2020, which is 30 to some years from now, will be paying very high taxes, as every generation has been paying. But I think those taxes will be lower than they would have been if Reagan had not been president.
The Reagan administration will be remembered for majoring in public relations and minoring in public improvements.
This administration will go down in history as one with an absolute callous disregard for fundamental American institutions, for the future of our children and our grandchildren, an administration which attempted to institutionalize greed as the national ethos.
Ronald Reagan, by the time he leaves office, will have appointed something like 50% of the sitting federal judges. Some of them, being young people, will still be sitting 30 years from now. That will be an enormous impact on the construction of our fundamental and statutory laws.
If what began in the Reagan years continues, women won't have the right any longer to abortion, or only the rich women will.
When we reflect into the years, will be the period of the largest deficit, the largest debt, the most isolation in the world community that we have known in a half century, and the most radical gaps between the haves and the have-nots.
I think the mark that he will have left will have been the mark of a strong, agreeable public personality.
Even though he may lose on Nicaragua, in the long run, I think the Reagan doctrine of trying to reverse the gains of the Soviets around the world, it will be a permanent element of our foreign affairs.
I think the most lasting impact will be an arms agreement with the Soviet Union. Just as Richard Nixon alone could open up China because he wouldn't be accused of giving the store away.
He's reinforced, if you will, the viability and the relevance of free societies, free economies, free governments for this century and the next one.
I think in the future we will see a retired Ronald Reagan every year on his birthday, which by then will be a national holiday in 49 states, Minnesota and the District of Columbia. But every year on his birthday, he will wave at us from his new ranch in Nicaragua, there with Nancy and their little slave, Daniel Ortega.
We'll be back in just a moment.
Talk about projecting ourselves into the future, about imagining how future generations will judge Ronald Reagan, but it's only talk, just a guess. Somehow, it's difficult to see folks 20 or 30 years down the road being quite as mesmerized by our president as we have been. Indeed, they'll probably wonder at how readily we swallowed Ronald Reagan's many contradictions. He has sounded consistent over the years, but so often he has talked us in one direction while walking us in another. We wouldn't have let Jimmy Carter get away with it, or Richard Nixon, or Lyndon Johnson. They, after all, may have been comfortable in the job, but they were awkward in the role. Ronald Reagan, we may one day discover, never fully mastered the job, but he fills the role so completely, with such grace and mastery, that we will have to wait until the footlights dim and the house lights go up again before determining whether the play was any good at all.
You know, the thing about writing this memo to the future is that Ronald Reagan still plays such an active role in our lives. We could certainly tell the future that he defied the orthodox tests for political success, and he was a lucky man. During the time that he was president, there was no Vietnam to undermine him. The Iran affair was a terrible blow, but it didn't cripple him, as Watergate crippled Richard Nixon, and he will be out of office before the national debt comes home to haunt us. We could also tell the future that no presidency before this one was so often judged as if it were a performing art. In that respect, he was unique. I shudder when it's suggested that politicians who come after him are going to have to succeed first on television. But he certainly held us spellbound. I shall always wonder whether it just happened or he calculated that it would happen. That's our broadcast. I'm Peter Jennings. For Ted Koppel and all the other people who helped us put this together, good night.
For a transcript, please send $3 to the Jennings Koppel Report, Journal Graphics, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038. This has been an ABC News special, the Jennings Koppel Report, Memo to the Future, a presentation of ABC News.